You won't believe what happened when this lady tried to steal my private lake. 3 loud knocks broke my peaceful morning by the lake. I opened the door and there she was, Karen Blackwood. Her arms were crossed, her chin was up, and she had that looked like she was about to take something that wasn't hers. "We need your lake," she said. "Not may we talk or can we work together? Just, we need it." I blinked. "You do know this is private property, right?" She didn't even flinch. Not for long. That moment started a nightmare I never saw coming. Fake charities, viral lies, and a battle that tested everything I believed about ownership, power, and knowing when to fight back. If you've ever had to deal with crazy neighbors, HOA madness, or someone thinking you're too polite to push back, get ready. This story goes places you won't believe. My name is James Davidson. I'm 42 years old. I thought I had seen every type of crazy neighbor. I was wrong. It all started on what should have been a peaceful Tuesday morning by my private lake. I got this beautiful 2-acre property from my grandparents. It has a stunning lake they dug back in 1960, after I sold my software company and retired. Early, this place became my safe space. I was sitting on my dock with my morning coffee, watching the sunrise shine on the water when I heard car doors slam. 3 cars had pulled into my driveway without permission. Out stepped Karen Michelle Torres, 48 years old. She was the self-appointed queen of Willowbrook Estates, HOA. Behind her marched 3 people like soldiers. Dave Martinez was the vice president who worshipped the ground Karen walked on. Bill Thompson was a former military guy who looked uncomfortable, that stayed quiet. And Sandra Kim was the HOA treasurer who carried a clipboard like it was a weapon. Karen walked across my lawn like she owned the place. Her heels clicked on the stone path I had personally put in last summer. She wore a business suit that screamed, "I am important." She carried herself like someone who had never been told no in her life. When she reached the dock, she didn't bother being nice. "We need to use this lake for HOA events," she announced, pointing at my property like she was doing me a favor. "This is public property. Community resources should help the entire community, not just one selfish person." I put down my coffee cup slowly, buying myself time to process this craziness. "Excuse me," I said, keeping my voice level. "This is private property. I have the deed, the surveys, and 30 years of tax records to prove it." Karen laughed. Actually laughed like I had told her the earth was flat. "Nobody gets to hoard natural resources like this in a community," she shot back. "I have done lots of legal research and there are examples of community access to water features." The legal research turned out to be something she had printed from a random blog post about public waterways. It had nothing to do with private property lakes. But Karen said it with such confidence that even I started to doubt myself for a moment. "Dave." Martinez nodded enthusiastically at everything Karen said like a bobblehead in a hurricane. Bill Thompson shifted uncomfortably but stayed quiet. His military training didn't cover how to deal with civilian property thieves. Sandra Kim wrote notes frantically, writing down everything like she was preparing for war. As they got ready to leave, Karen delivered her final shot. "We will be back with our legal representative. You should prepare to share this property in a civilized manner." Then I noticed something through my newly installed AI security cameras. Sandra was secretly taking pictures of my property from multiple angles. She was even recording the property registration numbers on my mailbox. That night, I couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't just about some community event. There was something planned about Karen's approach. Something that suggested she had been planning this for much longer than a casual Tuesday morning visit. I decided to upgrade my security system and start recording every interaction with these people. Little did I know that decision would save me in the coming months. I spent the evening researching Karen Torres. What I found made my blood run cold. She wasn't just some overzealous HOA president. She was a former marketing director who had been let go from her last job under mysterious circumstances. Recently divorced, she seemed to be using her HOA position to rebuild her sense of power and control. And according to public records, she had a very close relationship with Tom Bradley. The deputy director of city planning. Karen wasted no time launching her psychological warfare campaign. The very next morning, I found an official-looking letter in my mailbox. It was printed on fancy HOA letterhead that probably cost more than most people spend on groceries. Notice of Community Cooperation Requirement, it read. The Willowbrook Estates Homeowners Association hereby requests your immediate cooperation in helping community access to natural resources within our district. Failure to comply may result in escalated community action. It was bureaucratic nonsense designed to sound official and scary. But Karen didn't stop there. Within 48 hours, she had begun spreading rumors throughout the neighborhood that I was a selfish hermit who was preventing families from enjoying healthy outdoor activities. My AI cameras caught her in action. On Thursday afternoon, she appeared at my lake again. This time she came with a man she introduced as Marcus Webb, a geographical expert. Marcus turned out to be Dave Martinez's drinking buddy who worked at a hardware store and had never seen the inside of a surveyor's office. They spent 2 hours measuring my property lines with equipment that looked official, but was probably bought from Amazon. When I confronted them, Karen stood her ground with steel in her voice. We are simply checking the boundaries between public and private property, she declared. The community has rights that are more important than individual property claims. I noticed my neighbors starting to avoid eye contact when I walked by. Karen had been busy poisoning the well, telling everyone who would listen that I was the neighborhood villain. She was smart about it too. She never made direct accusations, just asked innocent questions like, "Do you think it's fair that one person controls all the water access while families with children have nowhere to swim?" The psychological pressure was working. I started second-guessing myself, wondering if maybe I was being unreasonable. Maybe I should just let them have a few events and keep the peace. But then my rational mind kicked in. This was my property, bought and paid for, inherited from a family who had worked their entire lives for it. I decided to fight back using Karen's own tactics. I sent a letter to every resident in the neighborhood, explaining the actual legal situation and inviting anyone interested to view my property documents. I also started recording every conversation with HOA members and upgraded my camera system. To capture audio. The letter worked better than I expected. Several neighbors came by to apologize, admitting they had only heard Karen's side of the story. Mrs. Peterson, the sweet elderly lady next door, was mortified. "I had no idea you owned that lake, James," she said, shaking her head. "Karen told us it was community property that you were hogging." But Karen wasn't done. That Friday evening, I received a phone call that made my blood run cold. The caller said he was Richard Hayes, attorney for the HOA. "Hayes here, Mr. Davidson," he said in a voice that dripped with fake politeness. "We can resolve this matter peacefully, or it can become much more complicated. Tom Bradley at the City Planning Department is also very interested in this case." The threat was clear. Play ball or face the full power of local government. But there was something off about this. Richard Hayes. Real attorneys don't usually make threatening phone calls at 9 p.m. on Friday nights. I decided it was time to hire professional help. I hired Tony Rodriguez, a former police detective turned private investigator, to look into Karen and her crew. What he found in the first week made me realize I wasn't dealing with simple HOA overreach. This was organized fraud. Richard Hayes wasn't a licensed attorney. He was a legal consultant with a sketchy background who had been reprimanded by the Bar Association twice for lying about his credentials. Tony dug deeper and discovered that Karen had been planning this for months, not weeks. The bombshell came when Tony showed me business registration documents. Karen had quietly filed paperwork for Willowbrook Premium Lake Events, LLC, a high-end wedding and event planning service. She had already signed contracts with 3 different clients, promising them exclusive access to a beautiful private lake venue. The total deposit she had collected, $15,000. Karen wasn't trying to steal my lake for community events. She was planning to turn it into her personal business venture, and she had already started taking money from customers. When I confronted her with this evidence, Karen didn't even try to deny it. Instead, she smiled that cold smile and said, "You're slandering me now, James. I will sue you for defamation." She then bragged about how she had already contacted the city planning department about zoning violations on my property. That's when I understood the scope of her plan. Karen had multiple angles of attack. If the civil harassment didn't work, she would use her connection with Tom Bradley to create legal problems for me through city government. If that failed, she would sue me for defamation and drag me through expensive court battles until I gave up. But Karen had made one crucial mistake. Bill Thompson, the quiet former military guy, had been recording conversations too. His conscience was eating him alive. He couldn't sleep knowing he was part of a fraud scheme. When he finally came to see me, his hands were shaking. "I can't do this anymore, James," he said, pulling out his phone. "I have recordings of Karen and Dave planning how to frame you for property violations if the civil suit doesn't work. She is completely out of control." The recordings were devastating. In one, Karen clearly stated, "If we can't take the lake, legally, we'll just have to make his life so miserable that he begs us to take it." In another, she discussed how Tom Bradley could always find some violations to cite me for. Armed with this evidence, I hired Miranda Chin, a property law specialist with a reputation for destroying fraud cases. Miranda listened to the recordings, reviewed the business documents, and smiled like a shark smelling blood in the water. "James," she said, "this woman has handed us everything we need to not only defend your property, but to put her in serious legal trouble. She has committed multiple felonies here. We decided to let Karen continue with her lawsuit while we prepared our nuclear response. But first, we had to survive the media blitz that was coming. Because Karen, desperate now that her scheme was unraveling, was about to play her final card, public opinion. Karen filed her lawsuit with great fanfare, complete with a press conference on the courthouse steps. She painted herself as a community champion fighting against wealthy privilege, standing up for families who just wanted their children to enjoy nature. The local news ate it up. "Wealthy tech guy refuses to share lake with community," ran as the headline on Channel 7 News. The story showed Karen, perfectly made up and speaking with passionate conviction about community spirit and sharing resources. I looked like the villain, the selfish rich guy keeping children away from swimming and families from picnicking. Miranda and I watched the newscast in her office, and I felt my stomach drop. Even knowing the truth, Karen came across as sympathetic and reasonable. She had decades of marketing experience, and it showed. But Miranda wasn't worried. "Let her have her moment," she said. "We're going to destroy her in court with facts, not feelings." The first court hearing was a disaster for me. Karen showed up with a team of 3 legal representatives, including the fake Richard Hayes, and a folder full of what looked like professional legal documents. She presented her case beautifully, talking about community rights, fair access to natural resources, and the need to prevent monopolization of water access. Most damaging, she had a petition signed by 47 neighborhood residents supporting the sharing of the lake. She even brought along a few families with young children who testified about how much it would mean to them. to have a safe place for their kids to swim. Sitting in that courtroom listening to Karen's polished presentation, I started to doubt myself. Was I being selfish? Was it so unreasonable to share the lake with the community? Maybe I should just agree to a few events per year and call it even. But then I remembered the business documents, the $15,000 in deposits, and the recordings of Karen planning to frame me. This wasn't about community access. This was about theft. Judge Patricia Williams, known for her no-nonsense approach to property disputes, listened to both sides without showing much emotion. At the end of the hearing, she scheduled a follow-up for 2 weeks later to allow both parties to present additional evidence. As we left the courthouse, I overheard Karen on her phone confirming details about upcoming events with paying customers. She was so confident she had won that she was already planning to deliver the lake to her clients by June. That night, Miranda and I planned our counterattack. We would let Karen think she was winning while we prepared to expose everything. First, we had to deal with the media narrative that was destroying my reputation in the community. The next 2 weeks were hell. Local reporters camped outside my house. Neighbors crossed the street to avoid me. Someone threw a rock through my window with a note that read, "Share the lake, you selfish jerk." But Miranda and Tony were busy gathering the evidence that would destroy Karen's entire scheme. The private investigator had uncovered a much larger pattern of fraud that stretched back months. Karen had not just stolen $23,000 from HOA funds to pay for her legal fees and business marketing. She had also promised investors 15% annual returns from her lake events, business, money that could only come from stolen property. Tony showed Emmy bank records proving Karen had been taking HOA maintenance funds for 6 months, creating fake invoices for landscaping and security services that never existed. The money went directly into her account, and then to Richard Hayes and Marcus Webb for their fake consulting services. The most shocking discovery came from Jennifer Walsh, the event planning company owner who had been working with Karen. Terrified of legal liability when she realized the scope of the fraud, Jennifer came forward with recordings of every phone conversation she had with Karen over the past 3 months. Jennifer arrived at Miranda's office shaking with fear, clutching her phone like it contained explosive secrets. "I recorded everything," she whispered, "because something felt wrong from the beginning." Karen was too confident about controlling property she didn't own, too specific about timelines and revenue projections. In these recordings, Karen outlined her entire plan in detail with shocking callousness. "How to steal that lake legally," she had said in one call, discussing various legal loopholes and pressure tactics. "If the legal route fails, we'll just destroy that man's reputation until he gives up. Rich people hate bad publicity more than they love money." Most damning was a conversation where Karen discussed her backup plan with Tom Bradley, revealing the depth of their corrupt relationship. If worst comes to worst, Tom can always find some violations to cite him for: code enforcement, environmental issues, zoning problems. There are always ways to pressure people when you have friends in the city government. The recordings revealed Karen had a complete lack of remorse or moral boundaries. She laughed about manipulating community sentiment, bragged about her media manipulation skills, and discussed James like he was an obstacle to be removed, rather than a person with rights. Miranda filed a countersuit for harassment, fraud, defamation, and conspiracy. She also reported Karen as a financial criminal to both the state attorney's office and the IRS for unreported business income from her illegal lake rental scheme. But Karen wasn't going down without a fight. When she realized her scheme was unraveling, she made one last desperate move. She called every media outlet in the city, claiming that I was bullying a single mother who was just trying to help her community. The day before our final court hearing, I received an anonymous phone call that sent chills down my spine. Drop everything, or accidents happen. We know you're alone in that big house. Reviewing my security footage that night, I discovered someone had tried to tamper with my camera system. Karen had completely lost control and turned dangerous. I had to decide whether to continue fighting for justice or prioritize my safety. Looking at my reflection in the lake that my grandparents had dug with their own hands, I made my choice. Some things are worth fighting for, no matter the cost. The media blitz hit like a hurricane. Every local news station picked up Karen's story about the wealthy tech guy bullying a community-minded single mother. The narrative was perfect for our social media age. Rich versus poor. Individual greed versus community spirit. My reputation was destroyed overnight. Former colleagues from my software company called to ask about my character. Dave Chen, my former business partner, actually asked if I had become one of those rich guys who lose touch with reality. Sarah Williams from our old development team sent a concerned text asking if I needed help with anger management issues. Neighbors who had been friendly for years suddenly treated me like a disease. Mrs. Rodriguez, who used to wave and chat about her garden, now crossed the street when she saw me coming. The mailman started leaving packages at the end of my driveway instead of bringing them to the door. Even worse, kids from the neighborhood began riding their bikes past my house, shouting things like "Lake Hoarder" and "Selfish Rich Guy." Someone started a Facebook group called Justice for Lake Access that gained 3,000 members in 2 days. The posts were brutal. Photos of my house with captions like, "This is what greed looks like." Memes comparing me to cartoon villains hoarding. Treasure.parents posted pictures of their children with messages about how I was denying them basic access to nature and healthy recreation. The group organized carpools to bring protesters from neighboring towns. They created a hashtag Share the Lake that started trending locally. Local news stations began interviewing random members, giving them a platform to express their outrage about my alleged selfishness and community destruction. Karen organized a protest outside my house, complete with signs reading, "Share the lake" and "Stop hoarding nature." The crowd grew from 12 people to over 60 as the day progressed. Children held handmade signs with messages like, "Kids need swimming too," and "Please share with families." Local news crews filmed everything, making me look like a villain hiding behind my curtains while families with children demanded basic fairness. The psychological pressure was enormous. I started questioning everything about myself. Was I the bad guy in this story? Had my success and early retirement made me disconnected from community needs? When I saw a mother explaining to her crying 6-year-old why they couldn't swim in the pretty lake, I felt my resolve cracking. Maybe Karen was right. Maybe I was just a selfish rich guy who needed to learn about sharing. My anxiety spiked when Channel 7 News ran a follow-up story featuring interviews with local families. One father, holding his disabled daughter, explained how therapeutic swimming could help her recovery, but the only accessible lake in the area was being hoarded by someone who didn't even have children. Watching that interview, I felt like the worst person alive. But then Jennifer Walsh's recordings changed everything. Shaking with fear during our meeting at Miranda's office, Jennifer played conversation after conversation where Karen detailed her real plan. The most devastating was a call where Karen laughed about manipulating the media and public sentiment. "That stupid engineer will never know what hit him," Karen had said with cold calculation. "By the time we're done, he'll be begging to give us the lake. These people will believe anything if you frame it right. Just show them crying children and talk about sharing. They eat that stuff up." In another recording, Karen discussed her financial projections with potential investors, completely dropping her community-minded facade. "We'll have at least 12 premium events per year," she had promised greedily. "With an average revenue of $8,000 per event, investors will see returns. That beat any stock market performance. Once we control that lake, we control the entire premium event market in this region." Most chilling was a recording where Karen strategized about destroying my character permanently. "Even after we get the lake," she had said, "we need to make sure he never recovers his reputation. Rich guys like him think they can buy their way out of anything, but public opinion is more powerful than money." Miranda prepared our nuclear response while Karen doubled down on her media campaign. She organized community meetings at the local library, where she painted me as the enemy of families and children. She appeared on talk radio shows, discussing property rights versus community needs, always managing to sound reasonable and caring, while portraying me as an out-of-touch elitist. She even started a GoFundMe campaign to pay for legal fees to fight wealthy property holders, which raised over $8,000 in the first week. The campaign description painted her as a David fighting Goliath, a single mother standing up to corporate greed for the sake of community children. Karen's manipulation extended beyond traditional media. She had supporters posting fake reviews about my old software company, claiming I had always been difficult and selfish. She encouraged people to contact my former clients and investors, spreading rumors about my character and business practices. The night before our final court appearance, Karen's desperation reached dangerous levels. In addition to the threatening phone call, I discovered that someone had tried to cut my internet cables and disable my security system. Karen knew that the truth was about to come out, and she was trying to sabotage my ability to defend myself and communicate with my legal team. My security system captured footage of 2 men attempting to tamper with my electrical panel at 2 a.m. When I enhanced the video, I could see Dave Martinez's distinctive truck parked down the street. Karen was coordinating actual criminal activity to prevent me from exposing her fraud. But I had learned from her tactics. Every conversation was recorded. Every interaction was documented. Every piece of evidence was backed up in multiple cloud locations. If Karen wanted to play dirty, I was ready with enough documentation to bury her in court. The final court hearing was standing room only. Karen had organized her supporters to pack the gallery, hoping to pressure Judge Williams with public opinion. Local media crews filled the back rows, expecting to witness a David versus Goliath battle. Miranda opened with a simple statement that cut through all the noise. "Your Honor, this case is not about community access or sharing resources. This is about organized fraud, embezzlement, and criminal conspiracy to steal private property for personal profit." She then systematically destroyed Karen's entire narrative. The business registration documents for Willowbrook Premium Lake Events, LLC. The $15,000 in customer deposits for events on property that Karen didn't own. The recordings of Karen planning to steal that lake legally and discussing backup plans to frame me for violations. When Miranda played Jennifer Walsh's recordings, you could hear gasps from the gallery. Karen's own voice filled the courtroom, explaining how to manipulate public opinion and destroy someone's reputation to force them to surrender their property. Karen's legal team, realizing the scale of the fraud they had been unwittingly supporting, began distancing themselves from their client. Richard Hayes, the fake attorney, quietly slipped out of the courtroom during a recess and never returned. The final blow came when Sandra Kim took the witness stand. Racked with guilt over months of sleepless nights, she testified about watching Karen forged signatures on historical documents and falsify community usage records for the lake. Judge Williams didn't hide her disgust. "Mrs. Torres," she said in a voice dripping with contempt, I have seen many property scams in my 30 years on the bench, but your exploitation of community trust to commit fraud is particularly despicable. Before Judge Williams could render her verdict, state attorney investigators entered the courtroom and arrested Karen for felony fraud and conspiracy. Tom Bradley, who had been watching from the back row, was also taken into custody for abuse of office and corruption. The charges were extensive. Karen faced 2 years in prison plus $50,000 in restitution. Her business license was revoked, her assets frozen, and her reputation destroyed beyond repair. Tom Bradley lost his government job and faced federal corruption charges. The HOA was dissolved and reformed under proper oversight. Dave Martinez and Sandra Kim faced civil penalties for their roles in the conspiracy, though Sandra received a lighter sentence due to her cooperation with authorities. I was awarded $75,000 in damages for harassment and defamation. The local media outlets that had run the original stories issued public apologies and published corrective articles with headlines like, "Local Man Fights Corruption, Wins." 6 months later, I hosted a small barbecue by the lake for neighbors who had supported Emmy and those who had apologized for believing Karen's lies. Bill Thompson was my first guest, bringing homemade beer and a heartfelt apology for his silence during the early stages of Karen's scheme. Mrs. Peterson, the elderly neighbor who had initially believed Karen's story, made a public statement that helped restore my reputation. "I am ashamed that I believed those lies about James," she told the local news. "He has always been a good neighbor, and we treated him unfairly based on manipulation and deception. The lake remains private, as it should be, but I occasionally allow local school groups to visit for educational field trips and permit charity fishing events for worthy causes, on my terms, with proper permits and with the respect that private property deserves." Looking back on this whole ordeal, I learned valuable lessons about standing up to bullies, the importance of documentation, and the power of truth over manipulation. Karen thought she could use community sentiment and media pressure to steal what wasn't hers. She discovered that fraud has consequences, no matter how well you package it. As I sit on my dock each morning with my coffee, watching the sunrise reflect off the water my grandparents created with their own hands, I'm reminded that some battles are worth fighting. Privacy is not selfishness. It's a fundamental right. And sometimes when powerful people try to take what's yours, you have to fight back with everything you have. Technology played a crucial role in my victory. The AI security cameras that captured Karen's illegal activities, the digital recordings that preserved her confessions, and the online research that exposed her fraud all proved that in modern battles, evidence beats emotion every time. Miranda still handles my legal affairs and has become a good friend. Tony Rodriguez does part-time security consulting for my property. And Bill Thompson has become my regular fishing partner, a relationship built on his redemption through honesty and my forgiveness of his initial silence. If you're facing similar property disputes or HOA corruption, remember that documentation is your best weapon. Record everything, research everyone, and never let bullies convince you that standing up for your rights makes you the villain. The moral of this story is simple. Don't mess with someone's property, especially when they have good lawyers. Better evidence and way more patience than you thought. And if you're planning to commit fraud, maybe don't record yourself discussing it. Just saying. Now I want to hear from you. Have you dealt with HOA horror stories, property disputes, or community bullies who thought they could take what wasn't theirs? Drop your stories in the comments below, because I'm always collecting material for future videos. And if this story taught you something about standing up to corruption or protecting your rights, hit that like button and subscribe for more real-life drama where justice wins. Until next time, remember that truth beats manipulation, evidence beats emotion, and Sometimes the best revenge is simply letting karma do its work through the legal system.